Hey everyone, my name is Brian Vecci, Field CTO at Varonis, and I'm going to talk about Microsoft Teams and securing data in Office 365. And we've got a little less than 30 minutes, so I'm going to dive right in. If you've got questions, please ask them in the Q&A window. I'm going to try to save some time at the end to go through them. If not, just hit me up in chat or LinkedIn, Brian Vecci, VECCI, and we can have a more in-depth conversation about this. But with that, as a quick introduction, let's dive in. So what's going on with 365? We've seen a pretty massive uptick in the last 6 months, and it's easy to see why. 365 makes it easy to collaborate, but think about the data that's both on-prem and in the cloud. From a data protection standpoint, do you know where sensitive data is? Do you have any idea if people are putting PII into spreadsheets and sticking them in their OneDrives or in team sites? Is any of that data open to people who don't need to see it? And if you could measure the risk, how would you reduce it? How would you reduce the likelihood of something going wrong without breaking anything, without getting in anybody's way? That's the reason we tend not to change anything, right? Because we don't want to screw anything up and break any business process or application that might be using that data. From a security perspective, especially now in a world where everybody is accessing data from any device, anywhere in the world at any time, sharing it with anybody who needs it, and suddenly we're all under attack from big cybercrime groups like Emotet and Maze. How do you know what people are doing? How do you know which accounts are accessing which data and whether that's appropriate? And if something does go wrong, whether it's an insider or an outside attacker, how would you know about it? How quickly could you come to a conclusion about what the heck happened, let alone recover from it, respond to it, make sure it doesn't happen again? And in a world driven by privacy, do you know why you even have this data? Do you know who's using it? Do you know which business unit is related to it? And can you prove that you're compliant? And if somebody asks you to, could you find their personal record buried in that spreadsheet sitting in someone's OneDrive? The answer is often no. I talk to CISOs and CIOs all the time. And when it comes to data and the security around it, these are often the highest level questions that they're asking. If you can answer yes to all of these, you're in pretty good shape, but most of us can't. Let's talk about 365 specifically. It's easy to see why we're using it. This presentation that I'm presenting to you from right now is sitting in my OneDrive. It's my primary data store at this point. And it's easy to see why. It makes collaboration really easy. I can share this with anybody who needs it. I've got access to this data from wherever I am. And the underlying complexity, how it's all working, is totally hidden from me. It's also hidden from IT, and that makes it harder to secure. Ask yourself if you're using Office 365 or Teams, which is really just an application that sits on 365. Who's got access to what? How do you know? Is any sensitive data exposed? How do you know? And is anybody using that data inappropriately? It's really hard or basically impossible in a lot of cases once you get even a little bit amount of data and a lot of users using it to answer these questions. Here's why. I'm going to go through, take you through how collaboration actually works in Office 365. I'm going to go through a pretty simple scenario to help you understand what's going on under the hood and then give you a sense of how Varonis can help put control around it. So it's important to remember, and I'm going to use Teams as the framework here. Teams is just an application. There's no such thing as data stored inside Teams. Teams sits on top of 365, and the primary data and identity stores in Office 365 are Exchange, Azure AD, OneDrive, and SharePoint Online. Teams, there's no such thing as data stored inside Teams. Teams talks to all of these pieces of Office 365, and actually, it's increasingly talking to more and more of 365. You got to remember, Microsoft, when they wanted to build a cloud data collaboration platform, didn't start from scratch. What they did is they took on-premises Active Directory and SharePoint, moved it up into Azure, made it cloud accessible, and then built applications on top of it. That means there's a lot of underlying complexity that isn't necessarily apparent. Here's what I mean. Let's meet our team. We've got Amelia, who runs finance. Under her are James, William, Linda, and Zoe. Also inside the company is Sandra, who works in HR, and Margaret, who's an external lawyer. We're going to create a team. We're going to use Teams to do it. We're going to put these people in it, and then we're going to do some collaboration so you understand just how easy it is to lose control of what's happening under the hood. So we create our team. That's nice and easy. By default, users can do this on their own. They are allowed to create their own teams. I've seen some of our customers who've put IT as kind of a breakwater there where IT has to create the teams. It doesn't really matter. You're going to end up with lots of teams. And all of the issues I'm going to talk about, by the way, apply whether you're using Teams or not. Here's our team. Zoe is an owner. Amelia is the owner. She added Zoe as a co-owner so that Zoe could do some management of the team itself. And then we've got members both inside the company and Margaret, who's a guest user from our external law firm. Now we're going to create some channels for collaboration and we're going to share some data. So Linda, who's on the team, she creates a bonuses channel inside this compensations team. So it's the finance team, they've got a team site that's created to talk about compensations. Linda is worried about bonuses, so she creates a channel and uploads a document that she's been working on. The document's in Excel. She wants other people to be able to access this and collaborate with her, so she sticks it in the team site. And it's an Office document that's nice and easy, totally by design. Now, we're going to share access to other people in a couple of different ways. So James is working on this Excel file, and he shares it with Emma from HR. So he's working on it. He decides, I need some input from Emma. I know who she is. She's in HR. There's no reason she shouldn't have access to this. So he goes up to the top right of the screen inside Excel, clicks the share button, adds Emma, and clicks send. Emma now has access to this document. James could even make it so that Emma could edit the document, or he could create a link that anybody in the company can use. But in this case, he shared it directly with Emma. Emma's got access to it. They're working on it together. Everybody's happy. We're all collaborating like a big, happy family. William, also on the finance team, is working with Margaret. So Teams replaces Skype for Business for chat. Skype for Business is going end of life. We're all going to be using Teams to chat internally. Skype for Business is the rebranding of Microsoft Link, if you remember that. It's probably another company that they bought. So William is chatting with Margaret. They both got the Teams client installed. Margaret's part of the team. This is great. William decides that Margaret needs to review a employment agreement. And so he drops the document into the chat. Margaret double clicks it. She opens it up. Now she's got access to it as well. That's it. That's our complicated collaboration scenario. At no point did I backdoor anything. At no point did we do anything that any user wouldn't do normally. In fact, there's lots of other ways that users could have shared access to data. There's lots of backdooring that we could have done, but I didn't do any of that. Very simple scenario. Created a team. People are just sharing access with each other and collaborating exactly how it's designed. But what is actually happening under the hood, you might ask? Let's take a much, much closer look here. So one of the things that you got to keep in mind is that with Office 365, and especially with Teams, users are security group administrators without even realizing it. So Amelia, who runs this team, added Zoe. Zoe now has the ability to add and remove team members, which gives her the ability to administer an Azure Active Directory security group. Whether she has any idea what any of those words mean, she's now a security group admin. Users can actually accidentally expose data in channels. Now, channels are used to give you areas of collaboration with inside a team. Linda created a channel specifically for bonuses, but she didn't make that channel private. Channels can be either public or private inside the team. And so she may not realize that anything she puts in there is accessible by anybody who's in the team, or really anybody who has access to the SharePoint site, which the team site is. And I'll talk about what that means, which means Linda created this bonuses channel to work with just a couple of people, but Sandra from HR and Margaret, who's an external user, still have access to that data because it's in the team. She might not realize that. Now, Delve makes this even worse. If you've ever used or you're familiar with Microsoft Delve, this is part of Office 365, and it's this really handy tool. Think about if you use Office like I do, my most valuable data storage access point is my recent documents in PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. Because most of the time, when I open up one of those applications, what I really want to do is open up one of the recent documents that I've been using. Imagine if you could do that for everybody in the company. That's what Delve is. It shows you all of the documents that other people are working on that might be relevant to you, whether you're supposed to have access to them or not. A number of CISOs who've said, yeah, I got a call from a department head after I turned on Delve saying, what the heck did you break? I now have access to all these documents from other departments. What's going on? The security is totally broken. And in fact, all they did was turn on Delve because the security was already broken. So keep an eye on Delve if you're not aware of it, or if you're not aware how it works. Private teams are not really private. So one of the things that you may not know with Microsoft Teams is that when you create a team, you get a choice to make it public or private. The only difference is that when you make a team public, anybody can search for and add themselves to that team. So most teams that are created are private teams, but they're not private at all, right? They're not actually locked down to anything. James, who's in the team, is working on this document, shared access with Emma, who's not in the team. And it was totally by design. There was no flag that went up. Emma's inside the company. She can authenticate to Azure. She can click on this link and access this document. The crazy thing here, it's not crazy, but you might not know, is that nobody actually knows that Emma has access to this document except for James, who did the sharing. Amelia has no idea. Zoe has no idea. Our security admins have no idea. Emma's got direct access via a link, which means if you review the people that are in the group, you don't see that Emma has access. That's kind of tricky. What about these files in chat? So remember, William is chatting with Margaret. They're using Teams to chat with each other, and William dropped a file into that chat so Margaret could access it. Okay, where is that file physically? Where does it go? Who actually has access to it? And if the chat closes, what happens to it? Is it deleted? Do you know? I didn't know before I started doing all this research to put together this presentation. Sharing isn't really caring when you're thinking about security. So when we think about sharing access to others, another way to think about that is granting access to. Another way to think about that is breaking the security model. Because if you've got things locked down to a certain number of people and users can share access with anybody that they want, suddenly the data may not actually be secure. Control is totally out of IT's hands at this point. IT wasn't involved in any way here. It's delegated to end users who may or may not know exactly what they're doing, and it's not clear where this data actually is, or who can access it, or who actually is accessing it. Sensitive data is not shared on a need-to-know basis. One way to think about that is that there's no privacy by design here. It's actually collaboration by design, which is the opposite of privacy by design, which means that data can be exposed internally, can be exposed externally as well. What does this actually look like under the hood, though? So here's all the underlying issues, but what's actually happening under, oh wow, my table almost broke there, under the hood. Let's see what this actually looks like. So when you create a team, what actually happens is that a new Office 365 group is created. And what that does is create a couple of Azure Active Directory groups. You can call them subgroups, a members and an owners group in Azure AD. It also creates a new SharePoint Online site, and it makes some changes in Exchange Online, in mailboxes and calendars. The key thing here is that there are changes in Azure and there are changes in SharePoint, and almost never shall the twain meet. Everything is SharePoint. That's one thing you really got to understand here, is in Office 365, everything is SharePoint. SharePoint Online sites are SharePoint sites. OneDrive are SharePoint sites. Team sites are SharePoint sites. Private channels are SharePoint sites. Everything is SharePoint, and it's all created automatically. That's how Microsoft hid a lot of this complexity. That's how they implemented collaboration. They just said, we're going to make everything SharePoint because that's what we've got, and we're going to make everything happen automatically. Let's ask ourselves, where is this Teams data actually stored, right? We want to figure out where sensitive data actually is so we can make sure that it's properly secured. So every team site that gets created is a new SharePoint Online site, and every team site has a standard channel that's called General for files and emails. So what's happening here is a new SharePoint Online site is getting created. Now that means and this is true for every SharePoint Online site, whether it's a team site, a OneDrive share, or a SharePoint Online site, a basic SharePoint Online site, you get 3 SharePoint groups that get created: owners, members, and visitors. Inside that SharePoint site is a folder, a document library. What Teams does is then create a folder in that document library that's accessible to those SharePoint groups. Now, Teams also has this concept of private channels. So if I want to create an area within the Teams site that is locked down to a subset of users, I can create a private channel. In order to make that work, what Microsoft did is said, all right, well, you'll just create a new SharePoint site, and then we'll lock it down to a separate set of SharePoint groups. So that means if you want to answer the question, where is Teams data stored? It's between 1 and 31 SharePoint sites, because every team site can have 30 different private channels. But remember those chats, right? So William was chatting with Margaret. If you drop a file into a chat, what happens is that file is copied to your OneDrive, and dynamic links are created to everybody that's in the chat. It's not just one-to-one chats, it can be a one-to-many chat. I'm going to do a webinar today talking about big game advanced persistent threats that we're seeing, like Emotet. And one of the things that we do as part of that webinar, it's really cool. It's going to be 12 Eastern today. Join us if you want to see it. We have a Teams chat going with like 30 people in it. So if we dropped a file into that chat, what happens is the files are copied to OneDrive. So now to sum up, if you want to answer where Teams data is stored, you got to go between 1 and 31 SharePoint sites in everybody's OneDrive, all with different SharePoint permissions that are related to, but not directly correlated with, Azure Active Directory permissions. Are you guys with me so far? Can't IT see what's going on? It's like, I got a SharePoint administrator. I got a digital workspace director. I've got a cloud collaboration, director of cloud collaboration. Somebody knows how to solve this problem, right? Let's find out. If we go to Azure Active Directory, what we see are the users that are in the Azure AD groups. You can see here are all the members of our Teams group. compensations members group. Do you see Emma? You don't see Emma in Azure Active Directory. Well, okay, James was sharing it with her through Teams, right? He clicked that share button in Teams. So let's go to Teams and see if we can see it. Nope. All you see are the users that are in that members group. It's a one-to-one relationship between what's in Teams and what's in Azure Active Directory. So now we're going to hop over to SharePoint. Because Emma is not visible in Teams, she's not visible in Azure Active Directory, which means she's got to be visible somewhere. What does it look like? Let's review how to look at the access controls within a SharePoint site in SharePoint Online. Here's what this actually looks like. I recorded a little video that I'm going to narrate for you. So here's the SharePoint site. I'm going to go to our bonuses folder, which is where this was. That folder got created when the channel got created. Inside that folder is the document. I want to see who's got access to this document. So I click on it and I go over here to the right and I can see that there are 4 groups that have access and 1 user. I can actually see that Emma has access, but I don't know what level of access she has or how she actually has access. 4 groups and Emma. So I want to get some more detail here because I want to know exactly how Emma has access. So I click on this manage access link that opens the permissions panel. This gives me some more information. You can see there are the 4 groups. Compensations owners there twice, visitors and members. If I want to see the level of access that these groups have, what I can do is I can click the little carrots here. You see that members can edit, and I can see that visitors can view. One of the interesting things about team sites is that visitors group, this is a SharePoint group, is not actually used. There's no such thing as read access when you use Teams. There's no such thing as view only access. If I want more detail here, because I need it, still don't see Emma, I go down to this advanced view. Here I can see the SharePoint groups that have access to this data. By the way, if you notice, I still don't see any actual people. I just see SharePoint groups. SharePoint groups are not Azure Active Directory groups. You can see here, if I click on the SharePoint group, I see the Azure group and I see Chris, who also has access. He's in the SharePoint group. I still don't see the people that are in the team though. I only see them in Azure and Teams. If I click on Manage Links, here we go. I can see the shared links that have been created and the people that are that have access to those links. Emma has access to that particular shared link. So once I drill down, I can see this for a single document. That's what you have to go through for a single document. There is no clear visibility. There's no central place to see who's got access to what. Emma and Chris are only available. You can only see them in the SharePoint admin console after some drill downs. The team members, the people that are actually in the team, are only visible in Azure Active Directory and Teams. You don't see them in SharePoint because SharePoint groups contain Azure groups, but they don't show you the members. And in Azure, you don't see anything about the SharePoint permission. That's what makes this so hard. And that's for a single document. Now, wait a second. You've been following along. I know I've been speaking quickly because I've only got another couple of minutes here. You've been following along. Who's Chris? How did Chris get into our compensations members SharePoint group? I walked through an entire collaboration scenario and I never mentioned Chris. Well, it turns out that because everything is a SharePoint site, you can actually share access to SharePoint sites. This is also by design. So somebody went to the SharePoint site in the web browser and did a site share. So I'm sharing access to the site. I'm a member, I can do this. And maybe I didn't know how to share the document specifically. Maybe I don't know how to use Teams, but I do know how to use SharePoint. So this is what I did. Totally by design, because it's a SharePoint site, you can share access. Chris got access, and what that does is it sticks him in the SharePoint group, doesn't stick him in the Azure group, doesn't show up in Teams, doesn't show up through any kind of link review. He's an individual on the access control list of the SharePoint group. That is incredibly complex, and that's, again, for every document, folder, and in this case, site collection as well. Brian, you're saying, I have E5 and Microsoft Cloud App Security, they're CASB. Surely there's a way that I can figure this out. The answer is no. There's lots of great security functionality that Microsoft provides as part of E5 and MCAS, but a lot of it is based on a DLP model where data needs to be tagged in order to see it. I'm going to search for all of the documents that Zoe has access to see if there's anything sensitive. Nothing shows up because this Excel spreadsheet has not yet been tagged. There's so many different ways to control access and grant access to people, control sharing within Office 365 that the complexity very quickly overwhelms us. You can share at the site level. You can share links to individual folders. And of course, you can share links to individual files, which happens all the time. There's lots of ways to control policies for who can and can't share and what they can and can't share access to. Auditing your configurations is important, but the more you lock down, the more you restrict people's ability to share, the more they're going to find ways around it. Trust me, try it. I do recommend that you block the ability for people to create anonymous internet links that anybody can use to access to data. A lot of our customers will block any kind of external sharing, although what we're seeing is that if you lock that down, your users are going to come back to you pretty quickly and say, I need it for X reason, and you're going to start to have lots of configuration can be really confusing, so be careful. You can do this at the tenant, the OneDrive level, Azure Active Directory, the team site level, the SharePoint level, the user level, the OU level. We've got a training course. It's an hour. It's probably worth going through if you're worried about what configurations are and what you should keep an eye on. And also, this stuff changes over time. The reason this is so complicated is that a lot of us are thinking about security in the model of traditional file shares, where you create a group, you create an Active Directory, you create a share, I should say, you create an Active Directory group, put people in that group, stick it on the share. There's a ton of problems with this model, right? You can have a folder open to a global access group like domain users or authenticated users. You can have a single group that grants access to lots of different data. You can have lots of different groups that grant access to a single share. Key thing here is that the users themselves can't hop into Active Directory and add their friend down the hall if they want to have access to their data. They can't break your security model. They can sort of screw things up by copying data where it's not supposed to be, emailing it to people. They can't break the security model. 365 turns that on its head. Whether you're using Teams or not, whether you're just using OneDrive or just using SharePoint, doesn't matter. Users can do the sharing. That's the entire idea of cloud collaboration. And they can share access to site connections, which, as we've discovered, everything is a site. They can share access to folders within those sites or individual files. They can share it to specific people inside the company, guests or external users. They can share it to groups or exchange distribution lists. They can create links that anybody in the company can use, or they can create links that anybody on the internet can use, and they can do this from web browsers, the Teams client. They can do this from the applications themselves, and they can do it from their workstation, mobile devices, web browsers, or Windows Explorer. And depending on what they're sharing and who they're sharing it to and how they're sharing, where you go to figure out who's got access to what changes. So to sum up here, when it comes to 365, if you want to figure out who's got access to what, it depends on where you go. Team members are only visible in Azure and Teams, but not in SharePoint Online, and vice versa. Owners can designate co-owners who can expand the team. Shared links are only visible in SharePoint Online, not in Teams or Azure. And site-only access is not visible in Teams or Azure either, Azure AD, I should say. There's no central place to see or control what's going on, which means you don't know who's got access to what. You don't know where sensitive data is concentrated. You can't prioritize risk or do anything to fix it. You can't comply with any regulation that says you need to apply least privilege, like the GDPR or CCPA. You can't limit your attack surface because people have access to too much and you can't reduce it. And if somebody starts behaving strangely, whether they're an insider or an outside attacker that's got access to those credentials, you're kind of screwed. There's no way to figure this out. Now think about the scale of your Office 365 environment. How many SharePoint sites, how many OneDrive shares, and how many team sites do you have? It doesn't take a lot before chaos builds up over time, and it feels like it's totally impossible to contain, but I'm here to save you. I'm here to help out. Varonis built a platform that was specifically designed to gather access controls from multiple different places, combine them together along with classification and monitoring with a commit engine to fix problems. We do this on-prem, we do this in on-prem SharePoint, on-prem Exchange, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Exchange Online, and Azure Active Directory as well, which means we are here to help you. We give you control. Now, before I dive into this, I want to highlight that we're a Silver Microsoft partner. We're available on the Azure App Store. We're not in the business of replicating any of the functionality that they give you. What we are in the business of is providing you a central place for visibility and control over this kind of data. This is what we do. It's in our blood. And we have a single platform designed to do it wherever this data sits. Here's what I mean. Here's what this actually looks like. We're giving you visibility, classification, activity monitoring, of behavior alerting, and the ability to fix problems at scale in a hybrid environment, on-prem and Office 365. It starts with classification. We have a single engine that'll go into the contents of files and figure out what data is sensitive. Doesn't matter if that data has been tagged or not. And in fact, we can read the tags and tell you where you have data that has sensitive information in it, like PII, that hasn't been properly tagged. It's one of the first things people do when they do a risk assessment with Varonis. This happens automatically. It's totally configurable. The idea is scalable, accurate classification that happens at speed and is totally up to date in a hybrid world. Same engine for on-prem or in Office 365. Here's what I mean. Here's our team site. This is a Varonis interface. This is Data Advantage. What you're going to see here is we found the file, we found PII in it. Not only do we have PII, we'll tell you exactly what PII is there and in what concentrations. 13 hits of PII in this bonuses document, which makes sense. Now, who has access to this, you might ask? Well, instead of going to 2 or 3 different places, we centralize the entire thing. Chris has access, remember, because he got access through the site share. You see him in SharePoint Online, but you don't see him in Teams. Here's all our team members and team owners. You see them in Azure or Teams. You don't see them in SharePoint Online. They're all here now. Here's Emma, who has access to the shared link. You might not know that when you create a shared link, what's actually happening is a new SharePoint group is getting created. That user or users are being put into that group. You're going to have multiple links to the same file. We're going to map all of that as well, because we're mapping the SharePoint permissions, the Azure permissions, the on-prem guests, and Azure identities, and putting it all together into a central place. And we're doing this for every single file, every single folder, every single site collection at scale. And guess what? That means we can take all of this data, put it together, and tell you where you're at risk. How many sites do you have? How many team sites? How many private channels? How much sensitive data in what concentrations, in which locations, and how much that data is being shared in ways that might be risky, so that you can go fix those problems. We're monitoring every data touch, every Azure authentication, every group membership, a creation and change, every site creation, every SharePoint permission and change, every shared link creation, shared link access, file access, along with enrichment, whether it's sensitive, in the same interface with everything that's happening at the VPN, within DNS, at the web proxy, on on-prem AD, and on on-prem data too. Give you a central place for fast investigations. And because we're monitoring everything with the right context, we know what's normal, which means we know what's abnormal, and we can tell you what's wrong. We're not just making copies of the logs, we're actually cleaning up these events as they come in, all of these different sources, adding additional information to them, building useful profiles, and then alerting you when something goes wrong. We give you threat detection in SharePoint and OneDrive, threat detection in Azure Active Directory, threat detection in Exchange, and threat detection on-prem, along with the ability to fix these problems. Only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to sum up here. We give you a central place to see what's going on in 365. We can answer questions about who's got access to what, classify and protect data, monitor everything, alert you when something goes wrong, and everything is hybrid and everything is scalable. Our customers that use Varonis also have E3 and E5, but they know that they need Varonis for a central place to see this. If you'd like to see what I'm talking about, if you've got any data in Office 365, it is worth doing a risk assessment. It is totally free. We'll map your environment. We'll show you what we're talking about. You got access to our incident response team. It's going to be a good use of your time. I guarantee it'll be valuable for you. Contact your local team or just reach out to me. I'm going to hand things back over to our moderator, because we've got about 3 minutes left, and you want to get access to you want to go to your next session. If you've got any questions, and I see a couple came through the chat window, please ask them, follow up with your local team, add me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, or join us for our Varonis Spooky Connect webinar today. I'm going to be dressed up as, we're all going to be dressed up as APTs and going through a live attack scenario where you'll see how people get access to data, move laterally, escalate privileges, find sensitive data, exfiltrate it, and then encrypt it. If that sounds cool to you, join us 12 Eastern, go to varonis.com/webinars, sign up. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us today. I hope this was useful for you. Sorry that I talked so fast. It's so much to get through, but it's a complex topic, and I wanted to make sure you got it all. So thank you, everybody, for your time. And I hope you have a great day, a great weekend. Happy Halloween. A question came in about third-party OAuth apps. That's a great question. Follow up, and I will dive into